Ava's perfect life shattered when she walked in on her husband's twisted world of crime and deceit. The lines between love, lust, and survival blurred as their home became a battleground for power and secrets. Tonight, only one thing mattered: who would make it out alive? It was a warm summer night in the city's heart, where secrets were whispered behind closed doors and desires were pursued in the dark. David Mitchell, a man trapped between the mundane life of a suburban husband and the forbidden allure of the criminal underworld, had no idea how his decisions that night would unravel into chaos. His wife, Ava, stunning and bold, was unaware of the danger creeping toward their seemingly perfect life, seduced by the promise of wealth and power. But in this world, pleasure comes with a price, and one wrong move could lead to a spiral of betrayal, lust, and deadly consequences. The stage was set, and the night would end in a way neither of them could ever have imagined. This is just the beginning of a twisted tale, filled with passion, betrayal, and devastating consequences. If you're ready to dive deeper into the thrilling events that follow, make sure to watch the full video. Hit that like button and prepare yourself for a story you won't soon forget. Ava Mitchell, 33, was the picture of perfection. At least, that's what everyone thought. Behind the respectable facade of a schoolteacher, she harbored secrets, dark, insatiable cravings that David, her husband, had long stopped satisfying. Their bedroom had grown cold, and her eyes had started to wander. Yet Ava kept her temptations in check, believing that routine was the price of stability. David Mitchell, 38, a banker, was different. He wasn't just distant, he was drowning in a whirlpool of failure. Losing control of his finances and trying to maintain their middle-class lifestyle, David had made a fatal decision: dealing with the wrong people. His desperation for wealth had dragged him into a deadly underworld that he could no longer escape. Even more terrifying, his obsession with making things right was masking something darker, an addiction to the danger. Enter Vincent Corleone, 45, a ruthless crime boss with a taste for destruction and indulgence. He didn't just take what he wanted, he devoured it. His name struck fear in the hearts of many, and now he had his claws in David. He could sense the weaknesses in both David and Ava, and he wasn't just after the money, he was after control, domination, and something far more personal. David had been laundering money for Vincent for months. Small transactions at first, then larger, riskier ones. It was all supposed to be temporary, a quick fix to patch up their financial leak. But things spiraled out of control when Vincent demanded more. David owed a sum he couldn't cover, and his lies to Ava about their financial stability grew more elaborate by the day. Late nights, hushed phone calls, and secret meetings became routine. Ava, suspecting something, tried to confront David, but he always brushed her off, attributing it to work stress. And then came the deal that would change everything: a large sum of money that David was supposed to smuggle out of the bank, masked as a loan. Only this time, something went wrong. The money never made it to Vincent, and now the boss was furious. It was a Friday night when Ava walked in from work, her feet aching from the long day. She opened the door to find David sprawled on the living room floor, blood dripping from the gash on his forehead. Standing above him was Vincent, his dark eyes gleaming with amusement as he flicked a switchblade open and closed, the metallic sound slicing through the air. Ava gasped, her body freezing in terror. "Evening, sweetheart," Vincent purred, not even looking up at her. His voice was like silk laced with poison. "Your husband's been lying to both of us, hasn't he?" Ava rushed toward David, but Vincent stepped in front of her, pressing the cold blade to her throat. Her heart pounded as his breath grazed her ear. "Not so fast, princess. You're part of this now." David whimpered, his face a mixture of blood, sweat, and guilt. "I can explain. Please, don't hurt her." Vincent grinned. "Oh, I'm not going to hurt her yet, but you." "David, you've really screwed me over this time." Ava, trembling, stammered, What do you want?" Vincent turned his gaze to her, eyes gleaming. "Everything. And I mean everything." He motioned to his henchmen, who stepped forward, one of them grabbing Ava's wrists, while the other forced David to his knees. "Please, I'll get you the money. I just need more time," David cried out, his voice cracking with desperation. Vincent knelt down in front of David, running the blade across his cheek just enough to leave a trail of red. Time's up, David. You either hand over the money or your beautiful wife here becomes part of the payment. Ava's pulse raced as Vincent's men bound her to a chair. She could feel their hands linger too long, their fingers grazing her skin in ways that made her stomach turn. She gritted her teeth, holding back the urge to scream, knowing it would only make things worse. "You should have seen this coming, babe," Vincent whispered in her ear as he tightened the ropes. "Men like your husband, weak, spineless, they're bound to fail. And you, well, you're just collateral damage." David struggled against the ropes, his voice hoarse. "Don't touch her. Please, she has nothing to do with this." Vincent smirked. "That's where you're wrong, David. She's got everything to do with this now." With a swift motion, Vincent pulled Ava's hair, forcing her head back. He leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear. "You want your husband to live, sweetheart? Beg for his life." Ava's eyes filled with tears, but she swallowed her pride, whispering, "Please, don't kill him." Vincent laughed, stepping back and nodding to one of his men, who delivered a hard punch to David's gut. He doubled over, gasping for breath, while Ava screamed, struggling against her restraints. Vincent's gaze darkened, and he motioned for his men to leave the room. "Give me a moment with the lady," he ordered, his voice dripping with sadistic intent. David's eyes widened in horror as the door shut, leaving him helpless, bound, and unable to protect his wife. Ava's body tensed as Vincent approached her slowly, his fingers tracing along her collarbone. "You've been a bad girl, Ava," he murmured, his breath hot on her skin. "But maybe we can work something out, make this little problem disappear." Ava's heart pounded, her mind racing. She could feel his hands moving lower, his intentions clear. She tried to pull away, but the ropes held her in place. "Let's see just how far you're willing to go for your dear husband," Vincent whispered. Before she could respond, the door burst open, and one of Vincent's henchmen rushed in, his face pale. "Boss, we've got a problem. Cops are outside." Vincent cursed under his breath, releasing his grip on Ava. "This isn't over," he spat, giving her one last look before storming out. As soon as the gangsters fled, Ava frantically worked at her restraints, finally breaking free. She rushed to David, sobbing as she untied him. "I'm so sorry," David whispered, his voice weak. "I never meant for this to happen." But Ava didn't answer. Her hands were shaking, her mind racing. They were alive, but for how long? Vincent wasn't done with them, and they both knew it. The aftermath of that harrowing night left Ava and David in a state of shock. But for the authorities, it was just the beginning of a complex legal battle involving organized crime, money laundering, and fraud. When the police arrived at the Mitchells' suburban home, they found the scene in disarray, furniture overturned, signs of a struggle, and the clear presence of violence. Ava, visibly shaken, explained that her husband had been involved in illegal dealings with a dangerous crime syndicate. Despite her emotional testimony, the police had enough reason to suspect David's involvement in serious financial crimes. David, slumped on the couch, hands still trembling from the ordeal, could barely speak as officers questioned him. The moment the police entered, he knew it was over. His decision to get involved with Vincent Corleone's criminal enterprise had come back to haunt him in the most horrific way possible. Now, there was no escaping justice. Officer Ramirez, the lead investigator, looked David in the eye as he read him his rights. "David Mitchell, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and aiding and abetting a criminal organization. You have the right to remain silent." David barely resisted as they cuffed him, his mind spiraling with thoughts of the consequences that awaited. As he was led out the door and into the back of the police car, Ava watched in silence. Her emotions were torn between anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of relief that, for now, they were safe from Vincent. The arrest of David Mitchell opened the floodgates for a broader investigation into his financial dealings. Detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit spent weeks poring over banking records, wire transfers, and internal communications from the bank where David worked. What they found was damning. Over the past year, David had been embezzling small amounts of money from high-value client accounts, funneling the funds into shell corporations controlled by Vincent's syndicate. At first, the amounts had been negligible, easily disguised within the bank's daily operations. But as Vincent's demands grew, so did the sums. By the time the authorities caught up with David, he had already laundered over $2 million through a complex web of offshore accounts. The trail led investigators to several key figures in Vincent Corleone's criminal network, linking David directly to organized crime. Financial records, incriminating emails, and phone call logs made it clear that David had been fully aware of his role in Vincent's operations. He wasn't just an unwilling participant. He had actively helped orchestrate the laundering scheme to cover up his own financial failings. Ava's testimony became crucial, not just for the criminal case against Vincent, but also for David's defense. Her words painted a picture of a man who had been trapped in a deadly game, but they also highlighted David's deceit and recklessness. Ava felt torn. Part of her wanted to save her husband from a harsh sentence, but another part resented him for dragging her into such a nightmare. David's legal team prepared for a grueling court battle. His attorney, Martin Shaw, a seasoned defense lawyer with a reputation for working with white-collar criminals, argued that David had been coerced into committing the crimes by Vincent's threats. Shaw claimed that David had been a victim, forced to launder money out of fear for his family's safety. However, the prosecution wasn't buying it. Assistant District Attorney Lisa Grayson led the case against David, painting him as a willing participant who had enjoyed the spoils of his illegal activities. David Mitchell wasn't just afraid of Vincent Corleone, he was greedy, Grayson argued in the preliminary hearings. He used his position at the bank to siphon money, all the while enjoying the benefits of a lavish lifestyle he couldn't afford. Ava was summoned as a witness for both the defense and the prosecution. On the stand, she described the toll the entire ordeal had taken on her, but under cross-examination, Grayson exposed the cracks in her story. Despite Ava's attempts to protect her husband, it became clear that David had never confided in her about the money laundering, leading the jury to question just how much Ava really knew about her husband's activities. The trial began 6 months after David's arrest, and the courtroom was packed with spectators and media eager to see how the case against David Mitchell, a respected banker turned criminal, would unfold. The prosecution's case hinged on the financial records and communications between David and Vincent. They presented wire transfers, falsified loan documents, and testimonies from colleagues who suspected that David had been moving money illegally for months. Most damaging was the testimony from an informant within Vincent's organization, who confirmed that David had willingly entered into the deal with full knowledge of the risks involved. David's defense, however, tried to shift the blame entirely onto Vincent, arguing that the crime boss had leveraged threats of violence against David and his family to force him into cooperation. They portrayed David as a man trapped in an impossible situation, making poor decisions out of desperation rather than malice. But the jury wasn't convinced. After 2 weeks of testimony and evidence, the prosecution had painted a clear picture. David was guilty of embezzlement and money laundering. Even if he had been scared of Vincent, he had still chosen to commit the crimes and had done nothing to alert the authorities until it was too late. At the sentencing hearing, the judge took into account the extent of David's crimes, the financial harm done to innocent victims, and his involvement with organized crime. Though David's defense argued for leniency, given that he had cooperated with the investigation and showed remorse, the judge was unrelenting. David Mitchell was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His once promising career and seemingly stable life were in ruins, all because of his greed and poor judgment. While David was behind bars, Vincent Corleone remained at large. Law enforcement had launched a nationwide manhunt for the elusive crime boss, who had fled the city before the trial began. He was last seen boarding a private jet bound for South America, using false identification papers. Authorities linked Vincent to multiple organized crime activities, including drug trafficking, human smuggling, and arms deals. His network spanned multiple countries, making it difficult for law enforcement to track him down. Ava, still recovering from the trauma of the ordeal, lived in constant fear that Vincent might return for revenge. She had testified against him, and though the FBI assured her that they were doing everything in their power to apprehend him, the knowledge that he was still free left her with sleepless nights. The trial had far-reaching consequences beyond David's conviction. The bank where David had worked launched its own internal investigation, leading to several high-level resignations and a complete overhaul of its security and compliance systems. The scandal had rocked the financial world, and the ripple effect was felt across the industry. Vincent's criminal empire, meanwhile, continued to crumble as more of his associates were arrested and charged. The investigation into his activities remained open, with authorities working tirelessly to dismantle the syndicate piece by piece. In the end, while justice was served for David Mitchell, the shadow of Vincent Corleone loomed large. Forever, the legal proceedings brought some closure, but the scars, emotional and physical, would remain with her for the rest of her life. As the dust settled, David Mitchell's story stood as a chilling reminder of how one man's greed and poor decisions can unravel not only his life, but the lives of those around him. His involvement with the criminal underworld led to a fall from grace that he would never have imagined in his once comfortable suburban life. Ava, too, was left to pick up the pieces, haunted by the memories of that fateful night and the constant fear that Vincent Corleone, still at large, might one day return. David would spend the next several years in prison, paying for his crimes. The weight of his decisions was something he would carry for the rest of his life. But even with David behind bars, the shadow of Vincent's criminal empire loomed large over those he had left behind. And for Ava, though she had survived, life would never be the same. This story of betrayal, crime, and consequence serves as a powerful lesson about the dangers of getting involved in illegal activities and the devastating ripple effects they can have. If you found this story gripping, there are many more real-life and fictional tales of crime and mystery to uncover. If you found this story gripping, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life and fictional crime tales. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below.